Now I'm going to talk about some of the adverse side effects of food aid. And I'm going to take the specific example of Ethiopia, which I think is a good example of why in some cases, not in all cases, but in some cases, in some respects, food aid can have very harmful side effects. Since the Great Famine in Ethiopia in the mid-1980s, 1984 to 1985, which killed hundreds of thousands of people, Ethiopia has become dependent on food aid to a very large extent. The country continues to grapple with very serious problems with ongoing conflict, both internal and with Eritrea, which is now an independent country. And of course it suffers various natural disadvantages such as drought. But the fact of the matter is that the country has become over-dependent on food aid, so much so that food aid has now, and this has been the case for about 15 years, food aid has now become an integral part of the country's economic structure. This is something which is now increasingly being criticized because food aid under normal circumstances is provided in emergency situations where there is a sudden collapse in food production, for example because of unexpected, unforeseeable drought or ecological disaster or climatic conditions, or perhaps because of war. But one does not expect this situation to persist for 15 years. And where it does, and where the country continues to receive massive amounts of food aid year in, year out, there is obviously something not quite right. And the principal problem would appear to be that the massive influx of food aid, free of charge, has undermined agricultural production in the country because there is no longer a viable economic market for locally produced food. If food is simply given away free of charge, then people are not going to be able to, willing or able to pay for it. And what is even worse is that farmers do not have the economic means, they do not have the income which would enable them to invest in agricultural production and to produce food themselves, which they could then sell. So it becomes a sort of vicious circle, and the more food aid is provided free of charge, the less the local agricultural economy will be able, the less incentive it will have to produce food within the country. And it becomes, as I say, a sort of vicious circle and ends up making the problem even worse than it was to start with.